What if the quiet man picking up trash in your neighborhood park wasn't just a janitor? What if the twin girls being bullied weren't just anyone's children, but belonged to one of the most powerful CEOs in the city? And what if the man who stepped in didn't throw a punch, but carried the weight of a battlefield on his shoulders? This is not a story about strength. It's about the courage to stand still when running away would have been easier. Before we begin, if stories about quiet heroes, second chances, and the small kindnesses that change lives move you, consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us share more true feeling stories like this, the kind that linger long after the screen fades to black. Now, let's begin. The park was still. Not silent, but still. Like the breath held between night and morning. Leaves shifted lazily in the breeze, and the hum of sprinklers faded with the rising sun. Few were out this early. Just a man and a little girl who looked too small for the oversized backpack she dragged behind her. Michael Hayes bent down slowly, his knees cracking as he picked up an empty soda can from beneath a park bench. He tossed it into the plastic bag hooked to the metal cart beside him. Nearby, his daughter Emily sat cross-legged on a faded blanket, her nose buried in a chapter book. She was 7, maybe 8, with the kind of serious expression you'd expect on someone 40 years older. Michael's uniform wasn't military anymore. It was a park maintenance vest, green with a city badge sewn over the chest pocket. The only camouflage left in his life was the way he avoided attention. But fate doesn't wait for your permission. A shriek broke the morning stillness. High, sharp, panicked. Michael's head snapped up. Near the lake, just past the wooden footbridge, a group of boys had gathered. From where he stood, he couldn't hear what they were saying, but their posture said enough. They circled 2 smaller figures, twin girls, maybe 6 years old. One of them leaned heavily on a pair of bright pink crutches. Her left leg ended in a sleek carbon fiber prosthetic. The other girl was gripping her hand tightly, trying to shield her. Michael was already walking. He moved without urgency, but with purpose. Quiet power in every step. Not a run, not a rush, just the kind of walk that made people step aside. He reached the boys just as one of them snatched the crutches away. "Put them down." The voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter like a blade. The boys froze. One turned, eyes narrowing as he took in the man standing behind them. He was older, but solid. Broad-shouldered, weathered face, graying beard, hands that had seen war, now holding nothing but a trash picker. "You deaf?" the boy shot back, trying to reclaim control. "Mind your business." Michael didn't blink. "Put them down." The one holding the crutches hesitated, then dropped them. They hit the grass with a dull thud. "You okay, sweetheart?" Michael asked, turning to the girl with the prosthetic. She didn't speak, just nodded once. Her twin looked up at him, eyes wide but steady. Then came the hum of tires. A black SUV rolled up the path and stopped with surgical precision at the curb. The passenger door flew open. A woman in heels and a steel gray pantsuit stepped out. Early 30s, commanding presence. Blonde hair pinned back like she didn't have time for anything to fall out of place. She took in the scene with one glance, the girls, the boys, the crutches on the ground, the man in the vest. Then her voice rang out like a gunshot. "Who do you think you are, touching my children?" Michael turned slowly. The wind caught the hem of his vest. "I didn't touch them," he said calmly. "Then why are they standing next to you?" she demanded, marching forward. "Why are there crutches on the ground? Where's security?" The boys scattered. No one noticed. Michael didn't raise his voice. "They were being harassed. I stepped in." "Harassed?" Her eyes narrowed. "By who?" Michael glanced toward the lake, then back to her. "They're gone." The girls had already hobbled back to the SUV. guided by the nanny who'd scrambled out from the driver's seat too late. "I don't need some janitor playing hero," the woman snapped. "Next time, call for help. Don't insert yourself." Michael didn't respond. She stepped closer. "And don't think this won't be reported. I know who runs this park, and I won't have strangers approaching my children." Still no response. Then, without a word, Michael bent down, picked up the fallen crutches, and gently handed them to the nanny. "She dropped these," he said simply. Then he turned, pushed his cart forward, and walked away. The woman watched him go, watched the quiet in his stride, the straight back, the way her daughters looked out the SUV window, following him with their eyes. She didn't know his name, didn't know that he once wore stripes on his shoulder, or that he used to command men with a glance. She didn't know the nightmares he wrestled with in silence, or that he worked this job because he'd promised his wife, on her deathbed, that he'd never leave Emily behind. She only knew that he didn't apologize, didn't explain. And that somehow bothered her more than if he had. As the SUV pulled away, Michael reached his daughter's blanket again. Emily didn't ask anything. She just looked up and handed him a folded napkin with a half sandwich inside. He sat beside her, took a bite, and looked out at the lake. The birds had returned. The water was calm again. But something had shifted, not in the wind, not in the air, in the story. Because someone had just stepped in to protect two little girls. And no one, not even the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, had any idea who he really was. The house Michael lived in wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a sloped roof with cracked shingles, and a porch swing that creaked like an old man telling stories no one asked for. It sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac where mailboxes leaned and neighbors kept to themselves. Inside, everything had its place, not because Michael was tidy, but because he couldn't afford to lose track of anything. The couch was threadbare, the dining table was scratched. But there were picture frames on the wall, one of a woman with kind eyes and another of a baby, swaddled in a white blanket. Now that baby was Emily, 7 years old, with a brain sharper than her father's boots. She was seated at the table, pencil tapping against a spiral notebook. A math worksheet sprawled in front of her. Michael stood at the stove, stirring oatmeal in a pot that had seen better decades. He was still in his green work vest, his name stitched above the chest. His boots left faint circles of dried mud on the linoleum. "You don't eat breakfast," Emily said without looking up. "I do now," he replied. "No, you stir it. Then you give it to me. Then you drink black coffee and read the same page of that same book for 20 minutes. Michael smirked, though it barely touched his eyes. "Sounds like I'm a man of routine." "You sound like someone who's pretending to be okay." He paused, the spoon resting in the pot. "I'm 7, she added. "Not stupid." He walked over and kissed the top of her head. "You're too smart for your own good, kid." She didn't argue, just closed her notebook and set her chin on her arms. "That lady yesterday, she thought you did something wrong." Michael didn't answer right away. He filled a bowl with oatmeal, slid it toward her, and sat across the table. "I didn't," he said. "But you didn't fight her." He looked down at his hands. They were rough, nicked, the nails short. Not every fight is worth swinging for. Emily chewed slowly. "Did you used to fight? In the war?" Michael's shoulders shifted slightly, a quiet recoil. "Sometimes." "Did you ever hurt someone?" He looked up at her. Her eyes were wide and honest. "Yes," he said. "And I saved people too, but not enough." She blinked. "Is that why we don't have your medals?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "I gave them back." Emily didn't press. She knew her father's silences were answers in their own way. At the park, the sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows beneath the sycamores. Samantha Reed, the park's operations manager, walked the perimeter with a clipboard in hand, and a gaze that missed nothing. She was in her early 40s, tall, composed, with a voice soft enough for lullabies, but eyes sharp enough to slice through pretense. She'd noticed Michael before, not because he talked, but because he didn't. Most workers asked for hours, complained about heat, or dragged their feet. Michael just showed up, did the job, and disappeared like breath on glass. After the incident with the twins, she'd done a quiet background check. What she found was nothing. No arrests, no complaints. Just a gap, 7 years in the army, followed by silence. Today, she found herself lingering near the playground where the twin girls sat quietly under a tree. Their nanny scrolled on her phone nearby, oblivious. Samantha approached slowly. "Hi there," she said gently. "I'm Sam. I work here." The more talkative twin glanced up. "Are you a ranger?" "Something like that." The other girl, quieter, paler, didn't speak. She kept her gaze fixed on the breeze rustling the grass. "Do you like it here?" Samantha asked. The talkative twin nodded. "It's nicer since the man helped." Samantha tilted her head. "Michael?" The girl nodded. "He scared the bad boys." Samantha crouched down. "Did that happen before?" "Sometimes," the girl whispered. Then she looked at her sister. "But she doesn't like to talk about it. After the accident, she stopped talking to people she doesn't know." Samantha's breath caught. She wasn't a therapist, but she knew trauma when it lingered in the edges of a child's silence. "She's brave," Samantha said softly. "Both of you are." The quiet twin looked at her, just for a second, and in that glance, Samantha saw something familiar. Fear wrapped in silence, but also resilience. That night, Samantha sat in her home office, digging deeper. She clicked through forums, read military reports, and eventually found an obscure article from years back. A civilian convoy in Kandahar had been ambushed. Only one squad had responded in time. A man named Staff Sergeant Michael Hayes had led the rescue. 12 civilians had survived. 4 of Michael's men hadn't. The article noted that Michael refused commendation, citing failure to complete the mission. He resigned 2 months later. Samantha leaned back in her chair, the screen casting a pale glow across her face. No medals, no press, just a name that vanished from the system. And now, here he was, cleaning benches, picking up trash, and still saving people. Quietly. She closed the laptop, her mind buzzing. The park didn't know who he was, but she did now. Claire Whitmore wasn't the kind of woman who left things unexamined, especially not when it came to her daughters. That morning, as she watched them finish their breakfast in the sunlit kitchen of their modern lakeside home, she noticed something unsettling. A shift. Sophie, the quieter of the twins, the one still grappling with what had happened last spring, had said a name. "Can we go to the park, Mama? Maybe see Mr. Michael again?" Claire had paused mid-sip, the coffee cooling on her tongue. "Who?" Sophie glanced at her sister, then back at her mother. "Mr. Michael. The man who helped me stand up. He talks like the people in movies." That alone would have been strange. But then her other daughter, Madeline, more outspoken, chimed in. "He's not scary, Mama. He's kind. And he looks like he could lift a tree if he wanted to." Claire smiled politely, but her stomach tightened. It wasn't just the words. It was the way Sophie said, "Mr. Michael," with trust. And Claire didn't trust men like that. That night, after the girls had fallen asleep, Claire sat in her home office. White shelves lined with industry awards, a sleek desk of walnut and steel, 2 monitors glowing in the dark. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. She had long mastered the art of quiet investigation. Michael Hayes, a common name, too common. She filtered by location, employment records, public service databases. Finally, a city parks employee record. Maintenance staff. Hired part-time 3 years ago. Minimal background info. She leaned back, lips pursed. Her instinct told her there was more. No one radiated that kind of control in a crisis unless they'd been trained to. She tried military records, but most of it was redacted. The only clear detail? Discharged honorably. No criminal record. No complaints. Still, that meant little. She knew better. She also knew what it felt like to be let down by men in uniform. Flashback. 3 years earlier. The rain hadn't stopped for hours. Claire had stood by the side of the road, heart pounding, watching emergency crews swarm the overturned vehicle. Her husband, Jonathan, had been trapped inside, alive, conscious, but slowly fading. And the first responder team had arrived late. Equipment failure, miscommunication. By the time they got him out, it was too late. Claire had held his hand in the back of the ambulance, heard his last breath. And somewhere inside her that day, something broke. Since then, uniforms hadn't symbolized protection. They symbolized risk, delay, loss. Back in the present, Claire stared at her screen. Michael Hayes had a face that said little, but eyes that had seen too much. She closed the laptop. It wasn't enough. She needed more. The next morning, Claire showed up at the park unannounced. Her heels clicked softly on the paved path, her trench coat cinched at the waist. Her gaze swept across the grounds until she saw a familiar face. Samantha Reed, the park's operations manager. Claire, Samantha greeted her, polite but cautious. Didn't expect to see you here this early. Claire got straight to the point. I need to ask you about one of your staff, Michael Hayes. Samantha didn't flinch. All right. My daughters mentioned him. Claire folded her arms. They seem attached. He's been with us a while, keeps to himself, works hard. I ran a search last night, Claire said. Very little came up, which usually means something's being hidden. Samantha studied her. You think he's dangerous? I think, Claire said carefully, that I need to know who my children are looking up to, especially someone with a background that vague. Samantha didn't respond right away. She looked out toward the field, where a group of kids were playing tag under the watchful eye of a volunteer. Then she said, You ever meet someone who's done more good than most, but never tells a soul? Claire didn't answer. Samantha continued, Michael Hayes isn't perfect, but he's not hiding. He's just not advertising. There's a difference. Claire's voice cooled. You're avoiding the question. Samantha turned to her, expression calm but firm. You want to know if he's ever been convicted of anything? Yes. Then no, Samantha said. He's never been charged, never even had a complaint. Claire narrowed her eyes. But? Samantha exhaled. But he carries something heavier than any sentence. What does that mean? Samantha hesitated. Then, finally, with quiet conviction. It means his only crime is silence. The kind that comes from having done too much good, and still thinking it wasn't enough. Claire blinked. The words hung in the air, heavier than expected. He ever talk about his past? Only when he thinks no one's listening. Claire looked away. She didn't want to admit it, but the answer unsettled her more than any accusation might have. Silence could be protection, or guilt, or pain, and sometimes all three at once. That evening, Claire found herself watching her daughters as they drew at the kitchen table. Sophie was sketching trees, and a man beside them, tall, with a wide back and hands full of fallen leaves. Who's that? Claire asked gently. Mr. Michael, Sophie replied, her pencil never stopping. He doesn't talk much, but I think he hears everything. Claire didn't respond. Not yet. The afternoon sun pressed down harder than usual, soaking the park in golden light that blurred the edges of trees and playgrounds. It was the kind of day made for laughter, for scraped knees and melted popsicles, for families and freedom. But not everyone who entered the park came with good intentions. Michael had just finished repairing a bent trash can near the picnic area when he noticed the tension again. Subtle, but unmistakable. A group of older kids stood near the splash pad, posturing like roosters in a yard. Loud voices, quick shoves, and at the center of it all, two familiar silhouettes. The twins. He moved faster this time. They were closer to the playground today, beneath a shaded canopy where the turf met the sand. Madeline, the stronger twin, stood in front of her sister with arms outstretched. Sophie clutched her walking stick, lips pressed into a thin line, body trembling but unyielding. "Didn't your nanny teach you how to walk straight?" one boy jeered, grabbing at Sophie's stick. Another leaned forward and whispered something that made Madeline's jaw clench. That was the moment Sophie stumbled. Not from a hit, but from a shove to her shoulder that forced her to the ground. Michael arrived just as her cheek hit the turf. He didn't shout. He didn't touch anyone. But when his voice came, it dropped like thunder. "Back away. Now." The three boys turned, startled. The tallest of them, phone already in hand, lifted it higher. "Whoa," the kid said, camera pointing straight at Michael's face. "Don't touch me, dude. You're not even security." "I said move," Michael repeated. His voice wasn't angry. It was commanding, measured. The kind of voice trained for war zones, not playgrounds. And in that moment, the boys obeyed. Not out of respect, but out of instinct. They backed off, mumbling as they retreated, the camera still recording. Michael bent down and helped Sophie to her feet. She didn't cry, but her eyes were wet with something more complicated than pain. Madeline stood beside her, clutching her sister's hand. "You're okay," Michael said softly. "You're safe now." They both nodded, but the phone kept recording. By that evening, the video had gone viral. Not the full incident, just 20 seconds, cut and edited. In the video, Michael appeared to step aggressively toward a group of kids. The audio had been filtered to boost his tone, making it sound harsher, more threatening. The caption read, "Vet loses it on local teens at park. Intimidates kids over playground dispute." The comments poured in like gasoline on an open flame. "This is why these guys shouldn't be allowed near kids. He looks like he's ready to snap. Someone call CPS. This man's dangerous." No one asked about the girls. No one asked what happened before the camera started rolling. Samantha was in her office when the call came. The Parks and Recreation Board wanted action. Immediate. "I'm telling you, it's a hit job," she argued. "I know this man. He's solid. We can't risk PR fallout," the voice on the other end said. "Suspend him, for now." Quietly. She hung up with shaking hands. That evening, Michael was sweeping the north entrance when Samantha found him. Her eyes said everything before her lips moved. "They're putting you on leave," she said, almost in a whisper. Michael didn't stop sweeping. "I fought for you," she added. "I showed them your record. I showed them the uncut footage from the maintenance cameras." He looked up. They didn't care. Samantha's voice cracked. "I care." Michael offered a tired smile. "That's kind, but it won't change what people see when they want a villain." "You could fight it," she said. "You should fight it." He leaned on the broom, the handle resting against his shoulder. "Let it ride," he said softly. Storms don't last forever, Claire found out later that night. Her nanny, panicked, had called to tell her about the video before the twins did. But it wasn't until she sat down with her daughters that the story changed. "Sophie," Claire asked gently, "did Mr. Michael hurt someone?" The little girl shook her head. "He helped me." "Helped you how?" Madeline answered. They were making fun of her leg again. They pushed her down. He made them go away. Claire looked at them, then at the paused video on her laptop screen. The footage told one story, her daughters told another, and in her gut, she knew which one was true. But that didn't stop the damage. The board at the city's Department of Parks had issued a quiet statement. "We are aware of the incident involving our employee and have taken immediate steps to investigate. At this time, Mr. Hayes has been placed on administrative leave." No context, no defense, just silence. Michael packed up his things from the small maintenance shed the next morning. His cart sat parked in the corner, unused. Emily stood nearby, holding her backpack, watching him. "They're making you stop cleaning?" she asked. He nodded. "Because you helped someone." He paused, then crouched to meet her eyes. "Sometimes, sweetheart, when you do the right thing, people don't understand. Not right away." She didn't blink. "But you did the right thing." "I tried," he whispered. Emily took his hand. "Then they're wrong." Michael smiled, not because it was over, but because her voice was the only one that mattered. The house was too quiet. It always was in moments like these, when the world had just closed one more door on Michael Hayes, and he hadn't found the courage yet to open another. He stood in the small laundry room off the kitchen, peeling off his Green City vest, as if it were a skin he no longer had the right to wear. The fabric felt heavier than usual, even though it weighed nothing at all. Outside the window, the sun was beginning its descent, bleeding soft gold through the blinds, casting long shadows across the tile floor. The silence in the house was not peaceful. It was loaded, like a pause between heartbeats. Emily was in the living room, lying on her stomach with crayons and construction paper, humming under her breath. She had asked how work was when he walked in, and he had done what any father would do when he didn't want to break a child's heart. He smiled, said it was fine, then went to the back room and shut the door quietly behind him. The room used to be an office. Now it was more of a storage space for things too sacred to be thrown away, but too painful to leave in plain sight. Michael pulled the chain of the ceiling light, which flickered before it held. Dust floated like snow in the warm beam. He walked to the far corner and reached for the top shelf of the closet. His fingers brushed the edge of the wooden box, oak, hand-carved, with a brass latch that clicked when you opened it, like the breath you hold before you remember something you wish you'd forgotten. He sat down slowly, the box on his lap. His hands didn't tremble, but they hesitated. Then he opened it. Inside, a folded flag, the kind handed to grieving families, a wedding photo, the edges softened by time, a pressed flower between wax paper, and beneath them, a manila envelope, unsealed, but never opened again since the day it was sent. He pulled it out gently. The envelope contained one sheet. At the top, Department of the Army. Below it, in black ink, typed with chilling precision, resignation of commission. Staff Sergeant Michael J. Hayes. Reason: voluntary discharge following field incident. May 11th. Michael unfolded the paper all the way. His own signature stared back at him. Sharp, firm, still full of the man who thought walking away would make it easier to live with what he'd done. His thumb brushed the signature like it belonged to someone else. He had never told Emily what happened in Kandahar, how a late call, a wrong decision, had cost 4 lives, how he'd saved 12 civilians that day, but not the 4 who had trusted him most, how the Army had offered him a medal, and how he'd left it on the table when he walked out of that room. He stared at the paper until his eyes blurred. Then he folded it again, carefully, and returned it to the box. He didn't hear the door open. "Dad?" Michael froze. Emily stood there in her pajamas, holding a worn, stuffed rabbit by the ear. Her hair was messy, her eyes sleepy. But when she looked at him, there was something too awake for her age. He wiped at his eyes quickly, but not quickly enough. Emily stepped forward and sat cross-legged on the floor across from him. "What's in the box?" she asked softly. Michael didn't answer right away. She reached out and took his hand, the small one enveloping the big one like a promise. "Did you do something wrong?" The question hit harder than he expected. His throat tightened. He tried to speak but found no words that could soften the truth or make sense of it for a 7-year-old heart. So he did what he hadn't done in years. He let the silence say it for him. Tears fell, not in sobs, not with noise, just steady, like rain that refused to ask permission. Emily climbed into his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Michael let himself be held. They sat like that until the light in the room dimmed to dusk, until the air felt heavier and the silence less cruel. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "You don't have to be strong all the time, you know." Michael smiled through the salt on his cheeks. "Where'd you learn that?" "Cartoon," she said. "But it's true." He kissed the top of her head. "Yeah, it is." Later, after he tucked her into bed and turned off the light, Michael stood in the hallway, one hand against the doorframe. He thought about going back to the box, but he didn't. Instead, he walked to the kitchen, brewed a cup of coffee he didn't want, and sat at the table in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the floorboards settling under the weight of memory. He had made peace with being forgotten. But tonight reminded him that maybe, just maybe, being seen, really seen, by one person who mattered, was enough to keep going. Even when the world chose silence over truth. Even when everything you were got buried beneath everything you couldn't fix. Michael stared out the window, watching the streetlights flicker to life. He hadn't answered Emily's question. But maybe, one day, he would. The envelope was pink, crumpled at the corners. The kind of paper sold in dollar store stationery sets, meant for birthday cards and sticker books, not statements that could shift a grown adult's entire perspective. Samantha found it on her desk one Monday morning, wedged under a stack of maintenance forms. No name on the outside, no return address. Just folded once, sealed with a glittery heart sticker. She peeled it open, expecting doodles or another misplaced lost and found note. But it wasn't that. Inside was a short message, written in careful, uneven pencil strokes. "Miss Samantha, please don't let them take him away. He didn't do anything bad. He just stopped everything. So we could be okay. Sophie doesn't say much, but I know she feels safer when Mr. Michael is there. That should count for something, right? Thank you. Maddie." Samantha read it twice, then a third time. Her heart tightened. An hour later, she was deep in the dusty, unglamorous back corner of the park's storage unit, where old maintenance gear, outdated signage, and, most importantly, the security DVR system was kept. Few people even remembered the maintenance cams existed, but Samantha did. She'd pushed for them after a break-in 3 summers ago, and she knew exactly where to look. She scrolled back through the footage from the day of the incident. Angle 3A, playground northeast, a grainy but clear view. There it was, the boys, the shoves, Sophie falling, and Michael, stepping forward, not lunging, speaking, not yelling, no threats, no contact, only presence. She hit pause, then rewind, then exported the entire segment, uncut, onto a USB drive. No edits, no filters, just the truth. Claire didn't expect Samantha when her assistant buzzed her office. "I told you I'm in meetings for the next hour," Claire said, not looking up from her screen. "She said it's about your daughters." That made her look up. Claire stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her downtown office, the skyline of the city stretching out behind her. Samantha sat across from her, the USB drive on the table between them like a silent witness. "This shows the full event," Samantha said. "The truth, not the social media version. Claire didn't pick it up. She stared at it, arms crossed. Samantha continued, her voice calm but unwavering. He didn't raise a hand, didn't threaten anyone. He just stepped in. Because your daughters were being harassed. Again. Claire turned toward the window. That's your perspective. No, Samantha said. That's the camera's. Claire inhaled sharply. And what would you have me do? Issue a press release saying I backed the wrong narrative? That I doubted the word of a man who's done more good in silence than most of us manage in noise? I didn't ask for a press release, Samantha replied. I'm asking you to consider that maybe you made a mistake. Claire turned. He's a janitor, Sam. He's a father, Samantha said quietly. A soldier. And apparently the only person in that park your daughter trusts when things go wrong. Claire's jaw tensed. Don't do that, she said. Don't play the moral high ground card. You weren't there when I lost Jonathan. You didn't hold his hand in the ambulance while they fumbled the rescue because some trained man in uniform couldn't get the door open fast enough. Samantha sat back. This isn't about Jonathan. Yes, it is, Claire's voice cracked. Every man in uniform carries his ghost. Silence settled like dust. Then Samantha, softer now, said, and maybe Michael carries his too. But that doesn't mean he should keep paying for someone else's mistakes. Claire closed her eyes. She hated this feeling. The dissonance between pride and truth, between instinct and evidence. She wasn't used to being wrong. And when she was, she certainly didn't enjoy being told. Later that evening, Claire sat at her kitchen table. The USB drive lay beside her glass of wine. The girls were upstairs, giggling over a cartoon, oblivious to the storm in their mother's chest. She played the video, watched it through. Michael stood between the boys and the twins, not like a man prepared to fight, but like one prepared to absorb, to anchor. She watched the way Sophie looked up at him, the way her hand had clutched his sleeve. That wasn't fear. That was recognition, the kind that doesn't come from words, but from presence. Claire rubbed her temples. She was tired. Tired of fighting shadows, of being defined by loss. She closed the laptop. Still, she didn't call Samantha back, didn't text Michael, didn't say the words that were starting to bubble beneath the surface. Not yet. Because sometimes, swallowing pride is harder than facing grief. But the letter still sat in Samantha's inbox, written in pencil, misspelled in places, honest in every line. And sooner or later, Claire would have to decide what mattered more, being right or doing right. The flash drive lay on the table like a silver key, one that could unlock a door Michael had no intention of opening. Samantha stood beside him in the empty maintenance shed, still in her park uniform, holding the proof like a sword drawn in his defense. You can clear your name, she said, her voice trembling, not from uncertainty, but from frustration. The video shows everything. No one can twist it. No edits. No lies. Just truth. Michael didn't look at her. He was crouched near the tool bench, oiling the wheel of a broken trash cart. Not because it needed it, but because his hands needed something to do. I'm not interested in being a headline, Samantha, he murmured. Not for 15 seconds of justice. She blinked. You're not even curious about what it shows? I know what it shows, he replied. I was there. Her jaw clenched. And that's exactly why you should fight back. Michael wiped his hands on a rag, slowly stood, and met her gaze. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, two people shaped by very different wars. Then he spoke. I once carried a little girl out of a collapsed village clinic in Kandahar, he said quietly. She was maybe 5, eyes like marbles, screaming for her mom. Samantha froze. She had shrapnel in her leg, but she was alive, he continued. We were evacuating civilians. I carried her across a field into a medevac chopper. He swallowed. She made it, but her mother didn't. We didn't see the second IED until it was too late. Silence pressed in. Michael looked down. The headlines back home said I was a hero, but no one talked about the woman we left behind. Her name was Safia. She had 3 daughters. Samantha's breath hitched. I never told anyone that, he said, voice low. Not even Emily. And what? She asked, her voice breaking. You think carrying that guilt gives you the right to let people ruin your life now? Michael didn't answer. Samantha took a step forward, her fists clenched. Look, I get it, she said, eyes glistening. You've seen things that broke something in you, but you're not on the battlefield anymore. You're here. You're in this community. You're raising a daughter. I'm doing the best I can, he said. No, she snapped. You're hiding. Her words hung in the air like a slap. Michael's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes flickered. You're not a soldier anymore, she said more softly now. You're a father, and your daughter doesn't need a man who always walks away. She needs a man who stands up when it matters. Michael looked away. Outside, wind stirred the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter drifted in from the swings. Life continued. Samantha's voice softened even further. Do you think Emily doesn't notice? That she doesn't feel it when you shut down? When you smile, but your eyes are somewhere else? She stepped closer. She doesn't need perfection, Michael. She needs presence, truth. She needs you to try. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Of memories, of shame, of love, of ghosts. Michael closed his eyes for a moment. Then slowly, like a man lifting something heavy, he nodded. Not fast, not theatrical, but the kind of nod that meant something had shifted inside. I don't want her to grow up thinking silence is strength, he said quietly. Samantha exhaled, her own eyes glistening. No, it's not, she said. Silence is survival. But truth is healing. Michael reached for the flash drive. He didn't put it in his pocket. He just held it, like he was feeling its weight. Then, with a sigh, he placed it on a nearby shelf. I'll think about it, he said. And for now, that was enough. That night, back home, Michael didn't mention the flash drive. He didn't mention Samantha's words. But when Emily asked if he could help her finish a school project, he said yes. When she showed him a drawing she made of her dad saving the day, he didn't laugh or brush it off. He knelt beside her, looked her in the eye, and asked what color she thought his cape should be. And when Emily hugged him good night, pressing her tiny hand to his cheek, Michael whispered the words he hadn't said aloud in years. I'm proud of you, kiddo. She smiled in her sleep. And outside, under the stars, the silence didn't feel so heavy anymore. The polished glass of the office window offered Claire no comfort that afternoon. Her view stretched wide across the city skyline. Skyscrapers, highways, the pulse of everything she controlled. But inside, her chest felt strangely quiet. Still. She reread the calendar notification for the 5th time. Meeting request, Emily Carter, age 7. It had been sent by Samantha. Claire had almost declined. She had an investor call, a procurement crisis in Dallas, a board member threatening to resign. But something about the sender's name and the child requesting her time made her pause. Emily Carter, the little girl with eyes too old for her face. And so now Claire waited, seated behind her massive glass desk, dressed in a crisp navy blazer, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. The door opened gently. Emily stepped in alone, her light pink dress carefully ironed, little sneakers tapping softly on the hardwood floor. Her hair was tied back in a neat braid. Claire rose halfway, unsure of how formal this was supposed to be. Hi, Emily said simply, her tone polite. "Thank you for seeing me, ma'am." Claire nodded slowly. "You're welcome. Would you like to sit?" Emily glanced at the big leather chair opposite the desk. Then she surprised Claire by choosing the smaller one near the window. "I like the light better here," she said. Claire's lips curved slightly. She walked over and sat across from the child, folding her hands. "So, Emily, Samantha said you wanted to speak with me. About Michael?" Emily nodded. "Yes, ma'am." There was a pause. Claire waited, not pushing. Emily looked down at her shoes, then back up. "I know you're important and busy," she said. "But I wanted to say something, before things go too wrong." Claire leaned in just slightly. "Go ahead." Emily's hands tightened on the edge of the chair. "My dad, he's quiet," she began. "But not because he's mean. He just got stuck in a sad place after my mom went to heaven. He doesn't talk a lot about the past, but he never lies." Claire's throat tightened. She didn't expect to feel that. Emotion, rising like an old friend, knocking where it wasn't wanted. Emily continued. "The day at the park," she said, "he didn't scare those kids. He stopped something. That's all. That's what he always does. He stops bad things quietly." Claire nodded, slowly. "I've seen the footage." Emily looked surprised. "So, you know?" Claire hesitated. "Yes, I know." Another pause. Then Emily said something that pierced straight through her. "I think he reminds me of your husband." Claire froze. Emily didn't falter. "But maybe he's like the version of your husband who still remembers how to love someone, even when it's hard." Claire couldn't breathe for a moment. Her composure cracked. What did you say?" she asked, voice softer than she intended. Emily tilted her head. "My dad never left me. Even when he was sad or broke or blamed, he still made dinner. He still tucked me in. He still stayed." The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Claire blinked away something behind her lashes. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Emily, do you know what happened to my husband?" Emily shook her head. Claire looked out the window. The city sparkled like it always did, oblivious. "He died in a hiking accident," she said. "Years ago. He was waiting for a rescue that came too late. There were mistakes." Emily listened, hands folded. Claire's jaw tightened. "He once told me, when we were first dating, 'Don't marry the one who always wins. Marry the one who knows when to stop fighting and just stand still with you.'" She swallowed. "But I didn't understand what he meant until he was gone." Emily reached into her little backpack and pulled out a folded drawing. She handed it to Claire. It showed a man with long hair kneeling beside a girl, a broken swing behind them. The words scrawled in crayon at the bottom read, "Sometimes heroes don't fight. They just stay." Claire stared at the picture. Her fingers trembled. "Why are you giving this to me?" she whispered. Emily shrugged, but her eyes shone. "Because you looked like you needed it more than him." Claire's breath caught. The girl stood up. "I have to go. My dad's picking me up soon." Claire stood too. "Emily," she said quietly, "does your dad know you're here?" Emily hesitated. "No, but he will." Claire smiled, a real smile this time. "Thank you for being brave." Emily smiled back. Someone had to. Then she turned and left, braid swinging behind her, leaving Claire alone with her thoughts, and a piece of paper that felt heavier than any corporate file she'd ever held. That night, Claire stood by the window of her penthouse apartment. The city moved below, distant and small. She held a glass of untouched wine in one hand, and in the other, the drawing. Crayon lines, simple words. but truer than most speeches she'd given. She thought of her late husband, of how often she'd armored herself in control, perfection, and mistrust, believing safety came from power, not people. And she thought of Michael, the man who didn't fight to be seen, who simply stayed. Slowly, she turned from the window, picked up her phone, and typed in a number she wasn't sure would answer. It was time to see the man the world misunderstood, and the child saw so clearly. The late afternoon sun washed the community park in a warm, amber glow. Colorful banners fluttered gently in the breeze. Laughter and music spilled across the grounds as families wandered among food stalls, face-painting stations, and makeshift stages. It was the park's annual community festival, an event meant to bring everyone together. Michael stood at the edge of the gathering crowd, one hand resting lightly on Emily's shoulder. She wore a paper crown and held a balloon shaped like a tiger. Her face was alight with joy, but Michael's eyes drifted elsewhere, always scanning, always watching. He hadn't expected to be allowed back so soon. After the storm of public opinion and his quiet resignation, he thought his role at the park was over. But then, Samantha had called. With quiet determination, she'd told the board the truth. And someone else had spoken up, too, an unexpected voice. Claire. She had said only 5 words. I think we misjudged him. Michael never asked what changed her mind. He didn't need to. That she said anything at all was enough. Now, standing in the sunlight among families and smiles, Michael didn't feel like a ghost anymore. Across the lawn, Claire walked with her twin daughters, one steady on her feet, the other moving slowly with her crutch. Claire's posture was graceful but guarded. She hadn't spoken to him since the reinstatement. Just a nod from across the grass, eyes unreadable. Michael didn't push. He had learned not to. He turned to Emily. Want to try the ring toss? She grinned. Only if I win a giant stuffed animal. Michael chuckled. No pressure, huh? As they wandered toward the games, a sudden voice sliced through the light-hearted noise. Help! Someone! My brother! He's locked in the storage shed. Heads turned. A small girl with tear-streaked cheeks ran toward the stage, pointing frantically behind the playground. Claire, nearby, immediately stepped forward. What's going on? It's my brother, the girl cried. The other kids, they locked him in the shed as a joke. But he doesn't like tight spaces. He's different. Claire's face changed. Without thinking, she turned and found Michael already moving. He wasn't running, just walking with purpose. His boots quiet against the grass, his shoulders squared. Claire followed him with her eyes. Something in her chest stirred. Behind the playground, a cluster of older boys stood nervously in front of a weathered maintenance shed. The door was shut. Inside, faint whimpering could be heard. The child inside, barely 10, was rocking and humming under his breath. Michael stepped into the scene like he'd done it 1,000 times before. The boys stiffened, ready to run. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply crouched down, his voice calm and steady. You boys ever heard of Specialist Lenny Carter? He asked softly. The boys exchanged confused looks. One mumbled, No, sir. Michael nodded. Specialist Carter once panicked during a supply run. He got separated from his unit, trapped inside a collapsed tunnel. He was just 19, couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. The boys went still. Michael's voice didn't rise, but it deepened. You know what saved him? A teammate who didn't laugh. A teammate who crawled into that tunnel beside him. Sat there, in the dark, just breathing with him, until help came. He stood up slowly, eyes steady. The hardest thing a man can do, he said, is sit with someone who's scared, and not make them feel alone. One of the boys whispered, We didn't mean to hurt him." "I know," Michael replied, "but now you know better. Go on. Let's fix it." The boys moved quickly, fumbling with the latch. The door creaked open, and a small boy tumbled out, eyes wide and wet with fear. Michael knelt down and opened his arms. The boy didn't hesitate. He ran straight into them. Michael wrapped his arms around the child and whispered something only the boy could hear. The crowd that had gathered watched in silence. No punishment, no lecture, just presence. Claire stood behind the playground fence, breath caught in her throat. Her daughters looked up at her. One of them whispered, "That's the man I told you about." Claire didn't speak. She simply walked over, heels crunching softly on the gravel. Michael stood, brushing dust off his jeans. Their eyes met. At last. She cleared her throat. "You always tell war stories to 12-year-olds. Michael gave a small shrug. "Sometimes they listen better than grown-ups." A smile tugged at her lips, but didn't quite form. She glanced at the boy, now reunited with his sister, sitting on the grass eating an ice pop, as if nothing had happened. "You handled that better than I could have," Claire admitted. Michael shook his head. "You would have found a way." A pause, then she said softly, "I misjudged you." Michael looked down for a beat. "It's okay. Most people do." "I'm not most people." Now he smiled. Just a flicker. "I know." Emily ran up then, holding a giant, ridiculous stuffed sloth. "I won, Daddy," she shouted. "The guy said I had perfect aim." Michael raised an eyebrow. "He didn't see you throw books at bedtime." Emily giggled and hugged the plush toy tight. Claire watched the two of them. For the first time, she saw not just a veteran or a janitor or a misunderstood man with a silent past. She saw a father, a good one, and something inside her, something long dormant, softened. "Michael," she said quietly, "would you and Emily like to have lunch with us sometime?" He blinked. "Us?" She gestured to her daughters. "We could use more stories like Specialist Carter." Michael glanced at Emily, then back at Claire. And in that tiny moment, under the fading festival lights, something wordless passed between them. Not romance, not resolution, but respect. The kind built quietly, the kind that stays. Morning mist still lingered on the grass as Michael made his way across the park. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a pale gold over the playground and walking paths. He carried a small broom and dustpan, the way some men carried rifles once, out of habit more than necessity. The park was quiet. The festival had left behind confetti, torn flyers, and traces of laughter that no one would sweep away. But something else caught his eye as he neared the old sycamore tree by the eastern bench, a spot where he often paused after cleaning, sipping coffee from a dented thermos, while Emily chased butterflies in the open field. At the base of the tree, nestled in a patch of moss and fallen leaves, was a small wooden box, handmade, uneven edges. Michael looked around. No one. He crouched down, brushing off dew and lifting the lid with cautious hands. Inside was a single object, a piece of sanded wood, roughly the size of a lunchbox lid, with something carved into it, by hand, with all the precision of a child holding a nail. The letters were shaky, uneven, but legible. Kam on chu Michael. Vi chu chung chao biet. Lam guoi tot. Kong kanain hintai. No name, just those words. The last line carved with such force, it had splintered the wood slightly. Michael sat down slowly on the nearby bench, holding the plaque in his hands like it was made of glass. He didn't smile, he didn't cry, he just sat there. His chest rose, then fell. Once. Twice. Then. Beautiful morning, isn't it? The voice was soft, measured. He turned. Claire stood beside the bench, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. She wore a light gray coat, tailored and elegant, but her face was relaxed. Less CEO, more human. She sat down beside him, uninvited, but not unwelcome. She handed him a cup. No sugar. Just like Samantha told me. He accepted it with a nod. They sat in silence, the kind that felt like a choice, not an accident. Claire glanced at the plaque resting on Michael's lap. She didn't ask about it, but she said, "I used to think respect came from medals, or headlines, or speeches at board meetings." She exhaled, almost like a laugh. "Turns out, it comes in crooked handwriting and wood scraps." Michael's lips curved faintly. He looked down. "I don't even know which kid left it." Claire tilted her head. "Maybe that's the point." A pause. Then she added, more gently, "One of my daughters asked me a question last night." Michael turned his head slightly. She said, "Can I call him Uncle Michael?" He didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the carving. But Claire saw it. The way his jaw tightened. The way he blinked once, twice. And then he lifted the coffee, as if to mask the shimmer in his eyes. He took a long sip. Swallowed hard. Claire didn't press, but after a few beats, Michael spoke. "Kids see what adults won't." Claire nodded. "Sometimes they see what adults can't." The breeze carried the smell of cut grass and fading festival sugar. Claire looked at him again. "You've given them something we couldn't. Not just safety, Michael. A picture of what quiet strength looks like." Michael shifted slightly. "I didn't want to be seen." Claire's voice was almost a whisper. "And yet, that's when people see you best." He set the plaque down on the bench between them. "I never expected to come back here," he admitted. "Not after." "I know," Claire said. "But Emily did." He glanced at her, surprised. She smiled. "She said you don't belong in the past, Dad. You belong where people still need you." Michael blinked. Hard. And this time, he didn't hide the tears. They weren't dramatic, just quiet. Like the man himself. Claire didn't speak again. She just reached over and gently set her hand on top of his, resting on the wood. Two people. One bench. One truth carved by a child's hand. You don't have to be seen to matter. You just have to stay. The late afternoon sun bathed the park in warm, golden light, softening every edge, stretching shadows long across the grass. The scent of cotton candy still lingered faintly in the air, a remnant of the community festival that had just wrapped up. Laughter echoed faintly in the distance, some families still packing up, children skipping toward the parking lot with balloon animals in hand. But at the quieter side of the park, near the old sycamore tree, 4 figures moved slowly along the worn gravel path. Michael walked in the middle. His hands were in his jacket pockets, not hiding, just at peace. To his left, Emily skipped beside him, clutching a paper lantern shaped like a fox, her cheeks still painted with fading stars. She chattered gently about nothing in particular, how the popcorn was too sweet, how the clown's balloon poodle didn't actually look like a poodle, and how she wanted to come back next year and help run the lemonade stand. To his right, Claire strolled quietly, her high heels traded in for simple flats, her hair tied back casually. One of the twins held her hand, Maya, the quieter one, who once couldn't speak at all. Her free hand now swung in rhythm with Claire's. The other twin, Lila, limped gently beside Emily, leaning less on her crutch than usual. And every few steps, the two girls would laugh together over something only they understood. There was no dramatic music, no orchestral swell, just footsteps, the soft crunch of gravel, the whisper of wind through leaves, and birds returning to the trees. Claire turned slightly and looked at Michael. "You're quieter than usual," he smiled. "I'm just listening." She raised an eyebrow. "To what?" He looked at the kids ahead of them. "That," Claire tilted her head. To the girls? Michael nodded slowly. To the sound of a future that doesn't need to be fixed, just protected. They walked on. At the curve in the path, where the playground met the open field, the girls paused, Emily spinning in circles, Maya and Lila watching her with giggles. Michael stopped. So did Claire. He didn't say anything at first, just breathed in the dusk. Then his voice came, steady, worn, but sure. The kind of voice that knew both battlefields and bedtime stories. Voiceover begins. I never got the medal, never needed my name engraved on a wall, and maybe no one will ever tell my story at a podium. A pause. Wind, the soft rustle of the girls' dresses as they twirl. But at a little park, no one ever noticed. Where the trees drop more leaves than people pick up. Where for months, it was just me, my daughter, and the sound of trash bags rustling, I saw something I didn't think I'd see again. A deep breath, soft and slow, as if the air itself remembers. 3 little girls laughing. And that was the biggest miracle of my life. Michael looked over at Claire, who had turned her face away slightly, blinking faster than usual. I'm not what you think, he said softly. I've made mistakes. She looked at him now, fully. So have I. Their eyes met, not in apology, not in romance, but in a rare kind of understanding. Then Claire smiled gently. You coming back tomorrow? Michael glanced down the path, where the girls were now walking ahead, lit by the low sun, their shadows stretched across the grass like pages waiting to be written. I think I might, he said. They began walking again, together. And for the first time in a long time, Michael Hayes wasn't walking away from anything. He was walking towards something. Not medals, not redemption. Just a life. A new one. Final voiceover, as the 4 figures walk slowly into the sunset. You don't need a perfect past to be a good person. Sometimes, just staying, when you could walk away, is enough to change someone's life forever. As they faded into the amber light, Emily reached up and took her father's hand. No words, just fingers curling into fingers. Claire reached down and lifted Maya, settling her on her hip, even though the girl was getting too big for it. And Lila, with her awkward step, leaned ever so slightly on Michael's other side. They kept walking, 5 silhouettes against the horizon. No applause, no headlines, just the quiet, radiant dignity of people who chose to stay. Together. Where in the world are you watching from? We'd love to know. Leave us a comment and share a little piece of your story. Every time we read your words, it reminds us why we tell these stories in the first place. If this one touched your heart, we'd be honored if you subscribed. It helps us keep bringing you more stories that speak softly, but stay with you. Thank you, truly, for spending your time with us today. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.